everybody is extremely surface level. There was no depth to very many people's character. I had the opportunity to sit down with a sales trainer. Now, this sales trainer, he was an older gentleman, probably in his 50s to 60s, and he had been doing sales training for over 25 years. And this was during a time in which I wanted to obtain my life insurance license. And so, I thought, why not sit down with somebody that has the utmost experience? And so while sitting down with him, as I was, literally grabbing a seat, he asked me, why do you want to go into life insurance? Why do you want to do this? And I gave him probably the worst response and the worst explanation I could provide. And I simply just said, I would like to help people. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's a really good response. You want to help people. You want to make sure that people have a sense of security and a sense of stability after a tragedy or a disaster. That's something that, a selfless person would do. But he saw right, and I mean right through that. That was probably the worst thing I could say in that moment. Because, this is a guy who had been dealing with people that wanted to get into life insurance for over 25 years. So he knew he's probably seen that a million times. And so he leads me down a series of questions. And why is my camera not working? Let's fix that. Sorry about that. He leads me through a series of whys. Like, why do you want to help people? Why do you want to do this? What made you, want to go down this route of sales? And a lot of these questions I could not answer truly. Because one thing that you realize is that whenever you answer something, there's depth behind that answer. There's depth behind why you want to do something, your motive for something. It's not just the fact of you want to help people. Let's cut the bullshit. The reason why most people go into life insurance is to make money because there's a high margin that you can obtain. And, I think if I would have been up forth and up front with that answer first, that would have been more impressive than me just saying, oh, I want to help people. Because when he leads me down this series of whys, it comes down to a point where I naturally just can't answer it. He's like, okay, why is your characteristic to help people? And, I was just like, well, it's just something that I grew up with. It's something that I was inherently taught. And, after that, there was nothingness. There was no depth to that answer. There wasn't anything that I could really grab from. And, he switches over because he gets extremely, not annoyed, but kind of irritated that I didn't have that depthful answer. So he's like, okay, well, since you can't really answer that for me, can you answer the question of what was the time in which you went out of your way to help somebody? What was the time in which you helped a person or people and you had no obligation to do so? And there was no mutual benefit. You knew that you weren't going to get anything out of it, but you still went out of your way to do it. And, I really thought about that. I thought about it for a good 2 to 3 minutes because I really, a lot of the things that we do in life are very surface level. It's for a mutual benefit. It's for something that we can reap a reward out of. And the only time that I could really think of, an instance in which I've genuinely helped somebody without expecting a return was whenever I went and I tutored kids for reading. And he asked me, why did you do that? Why did you, go and tutor kids how to read? And I said, well, sir, honestly, I always enjoyed reading as a kid. That was the number one thing that I always wanted to do. It was like, you could take, when I was, for example, when I was a kid and I would get grounded from, video games, or if I would get grounded from, going outside or whatever it was, because, I was just being a little shit. The one thing that would stop me from being bad was taking away my books. Like, that was the number one thing that you could take away from me that I would absolutely bawl my eyes out about. That was back when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Like, literally, that was the one thing you could not take away from me, because I enjoyed it so much. And because I enjoyed it so much, I cannot, like, it breaks my heart to know that there's kids out there that don't understand or won't know that enjoyment of reading and of exploring their own knowledge. So by me, putting myself out and going out there and tutoring kids on how to read and how to, ultimately enjoy that skill and enjoy doing it, and it's not something that's obligated for them to do, and something that's, doesn't have to be boring, makes me happy to know that I help them cultivate a skill of which they can find enjoyment in, and that will help them along their way and help them in their future. And whenever I said that, it was almost like a light bulb just fucking lit up, and he was like, there, right there, what you just did is exactly what you need to do when you sell. And basically, he wasn't leading me down a question of whys to be an ass. He wasn't, dismissing all of my surface level answers to be an ass. He was doing it because that is exactly what sales prospects do. They ask why. They try to get to the bottom of it. And if you can't show them the actual value of what you're trying to provide, if you're covering it and masking it with something that's very shallow, they're not going to want to buy from you. They're not going to trust you. There's nothing there of value that really appeals to them in which they can relate to, right? Because at the end of the day, if you just give them that, masked, shallow answer, it's something that they'll just ultimately dismiss. It's something that every single salesperson has already said or already done. And, this man, that's something that, the sales trainer, that's something that he really pointed out that I never noticed. It's like, you can have all these sales tactics, you can have all these ways of saying something, but if you're not straight to the point, if you're not digging deeper and you're just giving shallow answers, if you're living life shallowly, then there's not going to be any depth that you can reap from that. There's not going to be any reward from that, because it's just all surface level. If you deliver surface level, you're only going to get back surface level, and it's all going to be shallow. And through my 21 years of life, I've began to notice, like, most people are extremely shallow. You go up to somebody, let's say you go up to somebody who's working at Walmart, and I'm not dissing on Walmart workers. They are essential. We need them, right? But you go up to somebody in Walmart and you ask them, what is your plan for the future? What is your plan for life? What do you want to do? What's after this? And I can almost for certain guarantee you that this person, like, has no funneled down answer. They can't tell you exactly what the next step is. And the reason why is because if they knew what the next step was, they'd be doing it. They'd be taking that next step. They'd be at least working themselves to leverage themselves to that next step, to that next level. And it's just a stark realization, going through life, is that most people that you meet are going to be absolutely pathetic, and they're going to be absolutely shallow level or surface level, and they're going to be absolutely shallow. And that's something that I wish I would have known a long, long time ago before speaking to the sales trainer, because then you can actually, outsmart life. You can outsmart people by being simply just a level deeper than they are. And you begin to notice, like, a lot of these people, they like to throw these insults out there. They like to insult you. They like to say things that aren't true about you because that's all they have. It's only the surface for them. It's only the tip of the iceberg. They can't go any deeper. They don't know anything else beyond that. And if you let somebody that's surface level and shallow like that hinder you from your true potential, then there's no way that you will ever succeed. And there's no way that you will ever, conquer the life that you ultimately want to live. And so I ask today for you to actually think for a second, why are you doing the things that you do? Why, if you're working at Walmart, what is the next step? Even if you're above that, even if you're someone like me that's, fucking working in finance, what's the next step? What's the next thing to do? Or are you just going to stay there for the next 27 years and retire? Become something and somebody that has no influence over anything or anybody else. I mean, if you're happy like that, by all means, click off of this. That's up to you. But at the end of the day, I know that I want a life that's deeper, and I want to be around people that aren't surface level and want something that has depth as well. Thank you.